So I do think that my neurodivergence has become, a superpower in my dance experience. And it was a place that you could see that hyperintelligence presenting where it didn't present in the similar way academically. But I was more physically high achieving.
Welcome to Travel, Create, Repeat, where we talk with fellow artists, writers, and performers about travel and creativity. I'm Roxanne, and I'm an artist nomad who's been traveling full-time since 2017. Today's podcast guest is Brenda Russell, a dancer, dance teacher, and traveler. Today we're talking about the intersection between creativity and travel. Well, hello, welcome, Brenda. I'm so excited to have you here. You grew up in Portland, and when we talked earlier, you were talking about your family, and I have a really interesting ethnically mixed family background. I thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that about you. I wonder how has your experience with your family, like all these diverse backgrounds, has that had an impact on you and what you do?
I think it, you know, it's hard to say what we'll be drawn to. We don't know that whole nature versus nurture, but I do think I've had a unique amount of perspectives. My mother's family comes from England. Where I am now, I'm in London, and my grandmother was from Blackpool, England. My aunt and uncle were both born in England. And then my mother's family moved to USA, and she was born in USA. I was raised in Portland, Oregon. Pretty early on when I was, I don't know, like in my formative years, my birth parents split up, and my mother created a family home that was very Afro-American centric. And my mother and two of my sisters were in biracial relationships, and I have lots of nieces and nephews that are from those biracial marriages. And then my birth father married a Lakota woman, and so I had lots of step siblings that are Lakota and grew up going to powwows and being around Lakota culture. Then, of course, I had the neighborhood I lived in, which was quite a white Southeast Portland neighborhood. There's a history. A lot of people know like a history of Cleveland, of Ohio, having a lot of poverty and like a large area of people who are, just struggling blue collar workers. And Portland has something similar, but it's, having been in the past more of a white town, there's this area called Felony Flats. And I grew up in what they now call the Numbers, which is still like Southeast Portland is kind of considered this large area. It's interesting. When I was growing up in Portland, it was actually fairly segregated, but my house wasn't. So I didn't know that until later. Like later on, I found out that, oh, there's these different neighborhoods, and people didn't used to go into the different neighborhoods. Now, of course, it's grown and it's much more diverse, and the town, like all the neighborhoods, have mixed up much more. But there was a lot going on that I didn't understand at the time, and that I didn't understand that my experience was unique from other people's experience. But in my home, we had a lot of blues and jazz. My grandparents were dancers. My grandma was a dancer from Blackpool, England. My grandfather did calling for square dance. My grandparents square danced, and my mom grew up competing in square dance and dancing jitterbug. So growing up visiting my grandparents in the Seattle area, we would go to ballroom dancing at Seattle Center. We would go square dancing out in different areas that they lived in Washington State. And so I saw a lot of that sort of dance culture. At some point, my grandparents moved to Oregon and on the coast, and they got really involved in the jazz community in Portland. They were involved with Ron Steen and his jazz coffee house. And my grandpa was working on singing jazz at the jazz jams that Ron Steen still runs in Portland today. And so there was a lot of like music and dance happening there. And then additionally, my family that was like being created through marriage and community and connection in that way we had blues artists, blues drummers, blues bass players, like strong connections with the blues and jazz community through different parts of my family. So in a younger age, I was exposed to a lot more American Indian culture. And then now, through my relationship with my brother, um, having that adjacent community. And then through my mother and her family, and then my two older sisters, connected with the blues and jazz community and African American community. In my mom's home, after my parents divorced, we mostly listened to Black American music and actually watched a lot of Black American television growing up, had a lot of Black American publications. So when you grow up in an environment, you don't know what's normal. You don't know, I didn't know that I was white. Like that was something that I found out later. It's been a long journey of working through all the layers of what that means, that what's the difference between my culture and my expression and how that's impacted the way that other people have interacted with me and my empathy for the people in my family and the people that I've known and grown up with versus my own experiences. But in general, a lot of dance and music and art culture, a lot of diversity in different backgrounds and influences. And of course, after all those years of growing up with those things, and at times, thinking it was so boring, we were going to jazz on Father's Day, or for the holiday, we're going to the blues festival. And then growing up, as soon as I was of age, I was in the blues clubs. I was, running into my mom in blues clubs. I was working for the blues festival and, uh, you know, getting involved in jazz and blues and then teaching dance. And it all kind of came around that those things that I had grown up with and taken for granted became big parts of my life and just like organically what I continued to do.
Your background is so interesting. I imagine you writing a book one of these days. I'd read that book.
To tie in one more piece of the modern day, my stepfather, who I've known for a very long time, his family is all involved with the gospel church in Portland. And so that's another big piece. He's from a very large family that is very well known, went to Jefferson High School and kind of knows everyone in Portland. So there's also a continuation where there's like different relationships with different people, through my sister's husbands or my mother's husband. And throughout my life. But the person that I call my dad, my father of choice, Cloyce, is extremely connected and involved all through the different church communities and gospel communities in Portland. And that's a big community that we're still involved with. Plus, I know all the musicians in town. So my life in Portland and my cultural experience in Portland is just very enmeshed in the blues and jazz and gospel scenes. So that's kind of what it looks like more now today.
Thank you for that extra bit. That really adds even more. Lovely. We met in Portland. We met at the Transformational Voice Training Institute. I'm wondering if you could just briefly describe what that is and then how did going through that program help you?
So I don't know if it's because of my autism or what exactly was going on, but I had inbreathing, breathing in to talk and talking really high and talking through my nose and really intense, what do you call it? Sympathetic nervous system response happening all the time. So growing up, I had some feedback from not so nice, teenagers about my very annoying, loud, and shrill and constant way that I spoke. It had no filter and would babble. In one of my grandmother's churches growing up, they called me Gabby. And then when I was in my teens, I developed hyperthyroid, and my doctor was telling me a lot of the issues I was having with my throat were not because of my thyroid, but were because of my speaking issues. My grandfather had tried to tell me that I wasn't breathing and I wasn't speaking right. And it was never told to me in a helpful, way that I could receive as a loving feedback or a suggestion that could help me. It was always kind of critical. And so when my doctor, who had been an actress in New York, said, well, you could do some breathing things, or you could work on the way that you're speaking, and that would really help your voice, your throat. So that was the first positive experience I had with that. And then going on, I became a teacher, had a lot more feedback about my voice and my speaking, that it wasn't so helpful for some people. And I had known for a while, I'd had a little lesson with my doctor that I had used those techniques and practiced them. I met an airline attendant who gave me some advice and some exercises to do, who also had been studying theater in New York. And random people were like giving me tips on how to work on my voice and speaking and breathing. I think this was just before I was already doing some movement education stuff, but I was just about to get into Qigong at this point. But I saw that advertisement for Transformational Voice Institute, and Linda, she founded that institute and was using Italian opera training techniques to teach finding your authentic voice. And the thing that I loved about that place was that I had so many kind of cruel moments around singing. The entry to going to the Transformational Voice Institute was to videotape yourself singing happy birthday. I was not able to do that. I had also done some dance trade for somatic therapy with my voice. I forgot about that. And also had not been very supported in that. Somebody had tried to do a voice session with me, and I just cried for 2 hours, and they were like, you have to leave my office. So it didn't, like, I never went back. And so I had known from that experience of the one time I tried to go to an actual formal therapist and have a session, I got triggered and not supported. And so I thought, oh, there's something so wrong with me. And, even the therapist doesn't know what to do about it. So I was really like, there's no way that I'm singing happy birthday. Like, I could be here for 6 hours crying on the floor. And so they didn't make me do it. And they were very nice to me. I was like, I have no interest in ever singing anything, but I want to speak better as a teacher. Yeah.
I remember being there. I was just there for, I think I just took one class. I didn't do the full program, but I remember we were in the same group. We were in one class together. And it's so funny because I hear you now and your voice is so lovely. I would never think that there was anything ever wrong with your voice or any struggles with your voice.
Yeah, it was a long journey. I mean, the idea of the onset and we had this whole like using the H sounds and using the out breath, but also through I'm a movement educator certified through Franklin Method and several other modalities, but my year 2 Franklin Method, my graduation presentation was on diaphragmatic breathing. I mean, I drew that out of the hat. That was really good for me. So I also am a Qigong master through a couple different systems, and we work on that sort of thing all the time. And that was where I finally got to the point where in Qigong, we use the voice for healing. And so we do something called toning. It's the same techniques as singing, but in my mind, it's a different thing. It's making healing sounds, has nothing to do with singing. And so my brain can categorize it. And I've done it for a long time, and I feel very comfortable doing it. I feel comfortable doing it in front of people. I feel comfortable doing it when I'm on video. And so I'm using my voice in this very resonant way where I'm able to categorize it outside of the triggering idea of singing. And that has led me to feel more comfortable with using my voice in a way that I never really got with any of the other systems that I was doing, to where now I find myself just singing very naturally when I dance with people. I'll be in close embrace with people and I start singing and I don't feel shy. Like I just let my body resonate in that way that we learned about. That was an amazing mindset. The idea of that your authentic voice is really personal and like resonates through your body when you allow the mechanics or tools or the organism that you are to express in a healthy way.
So beautiful. I can picture you dancing and singing with someone. That's a really lovely image. So I want to know, when did you discover dance and how has it evolved over the years to where it is now?
I was always dancing. I mean, I have a really vivid memory of sitting in my older sister's lap, like bouncing and dancing to the song One is the Loneliest Number. And when I was 1 years old, I knew that I was 1 years old and that that song was about my age. So I have quite a few vivid memories of being very young and um, just being in that dancing a lot, swaying, playing around with my sisters. By the time I was 2, I was doing the Michael Jackson impersonations, and I like to do the rock. And there was that song, Dance, Shout, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground. And I would try to do the move called the rock, but my little toddler body, it was like really goofy looking. I was moving my knees around, and my sisters would make fun of me, and they would say, do the rock, Brenda." And I would do my little toddler rock. But I continued to dance with and learn from my sisters. I would do little skits and performances with one of my sisters, or learn dance routines from my older sisters. And by the time I was 4, I knew that I wanted to take ballet, that I wanted to take dance classes. And my family had dance happening. They all grew up around dancing and danced as just part of life, but nobody was really into this idea of training or taking classes. We didn't have a lot of money for those type of extracurricular activities. I did community gymnastics and soccer/football, but dance was always something that's fairly expensive and exclusive. It's not an easy community thing to find in the area that I was in. It's more accessible in Portland, but I lived in an outlying area where it was more private studios. And I continued to ask for dance lessons all through my childhood. We had talks, my mom and I would have these like kind of serious talks about whether or not I was going to be able to do it. I remember one day when I was 12 years old, her coming to me. Maybe it was 14, 12 or 14. She came to me and said, I thought I was going to be able to get you into this program. There was somebody we knew who was running a dance program for youth and teens. And she's like, I just don't think I can do it. I can't swing it. And I had been told that if you didn't start dancing by that age, that you couldn't be a professional dancer. And this was like something I had, seen, I don't know, on TV or read somewhere. I don't know where I got this information. It was pre-internet. So I'd gotten this message. And before that, like I had pictures of dancers all over my bedroom walls. I talked about dance all the time. I mean, I saw Flash dance in the theater as like a poor kid. Like I saw it 7 times. I lied to people and said I hadn't seen it so they would take me. I think I snuck into the theater, which wasn't something that I did often, but I was like very obsessed with dance when they would play dance on Dance Fever, TV show, Fantasy Island, Love Boat. They would have dancing sometimes. I watched Soul Train on TV. We had Black Entertainment Television at my house. I was like, then MTV came out at some point. I was like very into it. When I was 8, I started my own little dance company called The Great Balls of Fire, which is just really random.
That's awesome.
And me and my girlfriends would dance on the coffee table. We broke the glass coffee table doing our little routines. And yeah, we would march around and do playground rhymes and we made up routines to Madonna and this kind of thing. So I was I was doing it, I had routines. I was like, whatever I could do. I was very inspired by these movies of these, things like Flashdance and Dirty Dancing, watch that after school every day. I was like so into it. And so this idea that I had hit a certain age and I hadn't started training, and my family didn't have the resources to prioritize that. So I just kind of let it go. And I realized that's just not going to be a thing. From 10 years old, I started doing aerobics and actually learned a lot of Afro movements. And from that, there was a woman who had a lot of like West African dance influenced aerobics and other types of jazz dance aerobics that I was doing. And at some point, I was an adult making my own money and found out that there were very affordable dance classes for adults in Portland. I got a flyer in the mail that said, "It's never too late to start adult ballet." And I signed up for that class, drove into the city, which was a big deal for me, met a girl who told me that she was taking 8 dance classes through Parks and Rec. So I signed up for 10 and then 15 and then 20. And I didn't sleep for 2 years and I just danced nonstop. And that was kind of it. Like within a couple of years, I closed my school. I had been a early childhood educator and had my own homeschool for children of single parents. And I slowly transitioned out of that and didn't look back.
What a great story. What are some of the challenges and gifts that come with being a neurodivergent artist?
Well, stimming is the thing. We were talking about that earlier, that I was saying, I may move around, I may stand up, I may wiggle. That was something even in Transformational Voice Institute. I wanted to be able to stand up in the back of the room and move and not just sit in my chair. Because stimming is a thing, and that as an autistic woman, I need a lot of stimming.
Could you define what stimming is, just for people who might not know?
Yeah, stimming is movements that neurodivergent people and ADHD people both often use stimming. It can be like waving your hands this is like the really common one you'll see in children. If you have a child that does this, that's often a sign of autistic stimming. Bouncing on one foot, pacing. I have, all these little toys on the floor behind me where I can, kind of walk around on those blocks or roll on some balls, just play a song and stand up and jump around. So I do a lot of walking. I know a friend whose autistic daughter, walked a path in their floor and was having health problems from walking too much. So sometimes the compulsion to stim is so strong that it can become almost obsessive, but also it's just like a natural release. People used to say that I had a happy food dance, that when I ate, that I kind of like bopped. So I think there's a lot of stimming that I've done my whole life that I didn't know that that's what it was called, back then. But being able to move and dance, that just it moves a lot of that excess energy that I have. I have alexithymia, which is like where you experience emotions as physical sensations. So I don't experience emotions the same way that holistic or neuronormative people do, or a lot of people. I kind of have a sense of what the difference is through doing a lot of tapping and hearing dialogues where they try to tell people who experience emotions in this other way how to find them in their body. And because I already have them in my body, it gives me a sense that there's some other way that people are feeling them. But through doing a lot of tapping with a tapping solution organization, started to actually have a better understanding of how other people are experiencing emotions and how to identify which emotions connect with which physical sensations that I'm having and have a more quick access. Part of the problem is that when you don't have the same experience of emotions as other people, everyone assumes that they know how you're feeling, and then they tell you how you're feeling or even what you're thinking. That happens a lot to me because I also have that thing where I don't have a lot of expression in my face, which was part of my voice thing. I had a monotone voice because I didn't have vocal inflection. I didn't have facial expressions. It's like the character Wednesday in the Addams Family. She has a typical like alexithymic presentation. And so people are intimidated by that. I remember my aunt telling me that I was the most intimidating child she had ever met. And I thought, intimidating and child, like those words don't go together in my mind. But I can see how, being older and looking back, I can see how people are finding comfort through getting social cues, through facial expressions and maybe mannerisms, certain things that people say or do. And because I'm not providing that facial reassurance that people expect, they get confused. And then they try to figure out what I'm thinking. Then they try to assume what I'm thinking or what I'm doing, or they say I'm being this or that, and they really have no idea. Like they're usually quite wrong. But when people tell you you're doing this, you're feeling this, you're acting this way, and you're thinking, I don't feel like I don't get that. That doesn't resonate, but you assume that you're wrong. That's the typical gaslighting, the often unintentional gaslighting that happens to autistic women, especially. Yeah. I went a little bit off on tangent, but yeah, so stimming.
No, it's a great tangent. I mean, this is really fascinating stuff, and I know that there's a bunch of people that have some form of they're somewhere on the spectrum of the neurodivergence who would really love to listen to you talking about it like this. And obviously there's the challenges because we're living in a world that's not set up for being neurodivergent like the normative people. But there's also, I think, some gifts that come with being neurodivergent. And I'm very
Yeah.
curious about, like, do you find that, or are you connected with that?
Oh yeah, yeah. And yeah, that was definitely a long journey because I'm not that like Aspie type where everything came easily in school and that you're automatically like top of the class type autistic woman, but I'm very physical, and also I'm AuDHD, so that's a little different than, I mean, really they're going to kind of put it all in the same category eventually because it's really the same type of thing happening in neurologically. But we have all these categories right now of different things and how they present. Like we have terms like time blind or stimming or alexithymic. Right? There's lots of different little descriptors and terminology that people are coming up with for the stereotypical things that neurodivergent people do and experience. I'm also a synesthete, which means that I have, cross sense experiences. I see the colors of the numbers. I see the genders of the letters. I, I've always wanted that, like seeing colors when you hear music. I don't have that, but um, I I do have like more than half a dozen types of synesthesia. I have a type of color synesthesia where I know what colors people are going to wear when I'm meeting with them. And that's really an inconvenient one that I've struggled with for years, trying to not wear the same thing as the person that I'm going to meet.
That's really interesting. I mean, we could do an episode just on this. Like, I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah,
interested. Um,
yeah. There's a lot with the neurodivergence. There is, but yeah. So just to bring it back to dance and to that, like my work as an educator, as a movement educator, um, qigong and dance teacher. Typical things for autistic neurodivergent people is seeing patterns, pattern recognition. So growing up, because I wasn't that kind of Aspie type of autistic, probably because I'm AuDHD, so I also had the distraction. I can hyper focus, but I also get, scattered and whatnot. I grew up thinking that I was stupid and that I wasn't talented and that I wasn't good at things. It took me a long time to overcome that feeling or that belief about myself that I had gotten from the feedback that I had from other people, that I was slow or that I was just, yeah, it didn't help that I wasn't expressive. There's a lot of reasons that, I won't go into all of them, why people were reflecting that to me. But as a dancer, I was the opposite, right? Like because I am very physical, and this is I've I've seen some different books about like types of autistic women, and this very physical type of autistic woman is kind of a type, and it does make sense with the ADHD and the stimming and all of that. But in dance, my body and mind are very intelligent, right? I can pick up dance very quickly. I can mimic other people very quickly. That's also a really common autistic thing, to be able to copy or to, like cosplay, role play, um, taking on like seeing something and figuring it out and repeating it. So my ability to do that is in the dance world, even though in general I'm a slow learner, I'm quick and I'm smart with dance, with movement, with, not only dance, also with qigong, with martial arts, with things like that. I can really like see the movements, I can feel things, and one of the types of synesthesia I have is that like empathic synesthesia where you feel other people's feelings and you can kind of like feel the movements. I can feel the nervous system really easily when I touch people. And that all allowed me to develop very broadly and deeply as a dancer very quickly. I had some older women take me under their wing and say, "I will train you." And there were a couple women, LaRue and Beth, said, "You're going to pick it up really quickly. You're going to be able to do it. You have a great background in education and with kids. So, like, just let us train you and don't talk about your background." Rachel Lidskog also, encouraged me, like, we need more dance teachers, and I was very much worried that I needed like 20 years to do this or I needed all this training. And I did pack it in. Like I said, I really didn't sleep for like 2 years straight before I started teaching, but I continued to train. I told myself, like, a deal with myself, as long as you are consistently in training and coaching, then give yourself permission to share. Um, this is like a common thing that there will be a special interest. Autistic people or neurodivergent people have a special interest. And that's one of the differences between autism and ADHD is ADHD tend to have revolving special interests, like next, next, next. And then autistic people tend to hyper focus on a special interest. And I absolutely do that. I do both. I hyper focus and I'm like next, next, next. So I have this very deep and wide understanding of all sorts of dances. I'm able to really embody them, feel from people, adapt really quickly when I dance with different people. And so I do think that my neurodivergence has become, a superpower in my dance experience. And it was a place that you could see that hyperintelligence presenting where it didn't present in the similar way academically, which would have been, what a lot of the early flags of that's an autistic woman are when they're academically high achieving. But I was more physically high achieving.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Like I said, this stuff is very, very interesting, and we could maybe like we'll do a part two. We'll do more of a dive because there's so much there, especially the synesthesia. Like when I was working the Portland Saturday Market, there was another market person who had that, and he was making work pulling from his experience having synesthesia. But we're gonna take it now to the travel. I know that you travel quite a bit for work, teaching dance workshops, retreats, and other events. And you weren't always a passionate traveler. In our last conversation, you mentioned that. And tell me about how your relationship with travel has changed.
Yeah, when I've always had motion sickness, which is likely uh, overstimulation, part of my autism. That was probably a very early flag of my autism, that I have sensory sensitivities, light sensitivities, sound sensitivities, motion sensitivities. I was ill a lot, like I was throwing up in the car, when riding in the car, motion type things regularly growing up and into my 20s. That was like a really regular occurrence that I would be ill from motion. And when I started to travel, I had stomach ache the whole time. I would be bent over holding my guts in the airport, just feeling sick like I could barely walk. It was very stressful. I didn't realize a lot of neurodivergent people have anxiety. And being alexithymic, I don't like relate to that emotion. So at some point through studying neurodivergence and PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance, which is another aspect of autism that I have, a specific autistic type that I am. I kept saying, I was getting stuck because I'm like, okay, I have like all these kind of symptoms of PDA, but they keep saying that PDA people are anxious, and I'm not anxious. And then finally, I read a book where it described the anxiety symptoms as physical symptoms instead of the emotional symptoms. And then I was like, oh, yeah, well, of course I have all of those symptoms. And, but I also have hyperthyroid and, like I also have, DTSD. And so, or CTSD, some people call it complex traumatic stress disorder. So there's a lot of reasons why I, could be anxious, like presenting as heightened, right? It's also like most adult diagnosed women have CTSD. That's like kind of a given. If you're an adult diagnosed autistic woman, you will probably have been like gaslit and traumatized because people didn't know how to support you. And that being told that you're, like the synesthesia thing, right? If you think the number 7 is yellow, right? Like you're definitely going to get gaslit over that. So you end up with this complex PTSD happens even if you don't have other trauma factors in your history. So I was like, okay, there's lots of reasons why I could be a heightened person, right? But I eventually realized that, yeah, I did have a lot of anxiety and I was hypervigilant and it was overwhelming my system and like really difficult. I actually had a personal assistant as an adult my entire adult life until the pandemic. I have always had somebody helping me. And I have been fairly like low functioning without one. In the last 6 years, I have been much lower functioning than I was the adult years previous when I had assistants helping me. So it's definitely something that I kind of need and that a lot of neurodivergent people need somebody to help them with things that they're not high functioning in. Like most people see me as super high functioning, but like they don't realize that I'm actually not so independent and high functioning in general unless they actually lived with me and saw all the areas that I'm struggling with on a daily basis. And there are a lot of things that in my dance world I would get criticized for. People would assume all the reasons why they think that I'm behaving the way I'm behaving and that not that I'm actually struggling as a neurodivergent person. So that was also a long journey of going through. But the travel part, because I have time blindness, I had sensory issues. So if I heard a loud noise outside, I would sometimes get triggered, disassociate, not know where I was, not be able to find my way. I was getting lost all the time. I mean, on and on. And in the early years, I was traveling with assistants, like going on all my trips with me. A lot of my trips, some trips I traveled alone, but I did often take an assistant with me, and I still was like very much struggling. So I loved the experiences. I loved it when I got there, but the process of it was really hard. And I did it in bursts. And then at some point, I think I told you this that, or I mentioned it, that I went to like a spa night, open house, kind of little trunk show, like go into different rooms and have different little experiences. And the receptionist was a tarot reader. And she did this reading with me. And right away, she's like, oh, travel card, like you're going to travel overseas. And I was like, no, 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 I don't want to travel overseas. I don't like traveling. I don't want to travel anymore. And she's like, you have to. And I was like, what do you mean I have to? And she's like reading these tarot cards. She says, well, the work that you are to do in the world requires that you go overseas and reflect this work off of people from other cultures and, like more different people. You can't accomplish what you're meant to accomplish here locally. It's something that you have to take out into the world and have this like feedback or interaction with more people. And it was like really specific. Like this card had like a boat on, like you were definitely going over the water, kind of thing.
Did you feel anything when she said that to you? Did you feel chills or did you just feel like, no way? Like, what was your reaction to
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. And it all made perfect sense. And then it's like it all came out very concisely and like direct. You will go. This is why you have to go. And then she said, the people at home will not understand what you do. They will never really understand what you do, like what you do for work, what you do in the world. And it will be entirely your responsibility to maintain the connections with everyone. And so it was this very clear, like, you have this stuff that you're meant to do. You have to do it elsewhere. People aren't going to understand, and you have to be the one to bridge that connection and stay connected with them despite the fact that they don't really know what you do and what's going on in your life. So I just felt like, okay, this is, I resolved myself. I ended up doing a lot of touring after that. I got hired to do a lot of tours in Europe. I started going to overseas 3 to 4 times a year. I did tours in Asia, Australia, all through Europe. And I started a postcard list, took like all these people in my life, have like stacks of postcards that I sent. At some point I had been, to Lucerne like 50 times, and they didn't need a 50th postcard from Lucerne, but when I went somewhere new, I would always send postcards to people and buy souvenirs, bring people home like goodies. I've done like a lot of trying to at least connect people with my travels, even if they didn't really know what I do out there in the world. And what I do is, it's not so simple as like teaching dance, right? Of course, my work is more nuanced and I would say spiritual than that.
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about the nuance and the spiritual part of it and what makes it a little different than just teaching a dance.
Well, I definitely follow a flow. I don't like this idea of goals, and I have a lot of inspiration and ideas. The woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love wrote a book about,
Elizabeth Gilbert.
yes, wrote a book about like art and the way it comes to us, and had all these. I remember this piece of Catching the Tiger by the Tail about this woman who would get a poem when she was out in the fields, like somewhere like Montana or Wyoming, and would like run home to the paper to write it down. And that by the time she got there, she was like grabbing the end of the poem and pulling it back to her. But this way that we get inspiration, this way that we get these creative, like almost entities or thoughts like come to us and want to be shared. So I get downloads. I like have connected with ancestral knowledge, had a lot of these kind of experiences, see visions, get like an image or a feeling of a time and a place of movements of things. And I've had mentors who get downloads and who channel ancestors that I've seen. So yeah, like it's not something that I usually talk about because not everybody wants to talk about those kind of things or feels comfortable with that type of language. But that's my experience. Like whatever it is, that's what it's seemed like it's the best way I can describe experiences that I've had. There's been things that I do random things. Like one time I didn't listen to secular TV or radio for 7 years. I did a thing where I didn't listen to recorded music for 6 months, and then I only listened to live music and records for another 6 months. And then I spent years only going to a live show where you sat down in a chair once a month and only going to a dance where there was recorded music once a month. I would go to like 2 to 8 hours a day of live music for years at a time when I lived in Portland. I've done like a lot of these intense little, I don't know what they are, like what I'm doing. Like I don't know why I'm doing that. I just decide like I'm gonna do this.
It's almost like little challenges, like mini challenges to see what comes of it. Almost like a
Yeah,
retreat. You took
yeah,
yourself on a living retreat. In a way, that challenge sounds like kind of a form of art retreat to me.
yeah, yeah. I've done the darkness deprivation recovery stuff where, I like didn't use artificial light after dark for 30 days or, like only used candles and had blackout curtains and, stuff. I've done these different things and then something comes out of it, right? So you do this, it feels like fasting for me. Having hyperthyroid, I can't really do food fasting. I've done a lot of restrictive diets, but I shouldn't really do food fasting. But I do a lot of other kinds of fasting. Um, so, and then something comes out of it. And I don't know if that really ties in so directly, but the other thing that happens as I follow this flow and just do what I do and try not to overthink it is I've been running retreats for a long time, and there are lots of people who have come through my retreats who have decided to re-educate, an uncanny amount of people. So people who decided to become Franklin Method educators, people who decided to become Alexander Technique teachers. One of my students became a holistic baker. I had a student who was getting a PhD in math and decided to become a type of therapist that does body work. I don't know the exact modality, and a martial artist. My student who became a holistic baker is doing breath and like the cold therapy kind of work and martial arts. Dance teaching was in science. Somebody became a kinesiologist. Somebody studied spiral technique and ballet. There's so many people who came to a retreat of mine where the focus is movement-based lifestyle, sensual living, and community through social dance. And after coming to many of these types of retreats where you have this experience of living a movement-based lifestyle for a period of time, we're not able to go back to their life. They went back to their life and were like, I need to change this. And they became part of the holistic health community.
That is really interesting.
So it's not a goal, it's not an intention, it's not something I'm trying to do. It's just something that's happening. And I trust that there's like some value in that, and that is like this bigger value in the retreats that I offer. I mean, some people are really coming just to become a better, blues dancer or swing dancer, then find out that there's a whole nother world and like way to live, way to be in the world, way to experience your body and your life that they never considered.
It sounds like your retreat opens a door for people into some transformational thing. Yeah.
They have an experience. They have an experience. And it's that
Yeah.
like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? Once you've had that experience, it's hard to stop feeling that.
You moved from Portland to London. And how was it going from, one country to another? Do you feel like you have a work-life balance? Have you found it yet? Or is that still coming?
So I've been saying that I was going to move for ages. And I'm always like, I'm going to move here. I'm going to move there. Or sure, maybe I'll move here. Like I'm always, every place I go, I'm like, I could live here. I left Portland and moved to San Francisco in 2005. That felt even like 3 years after whatever energies wanted me to go. Like I was being really pulled to like go and to travel. I did leave Portland in 2005. I ended up back there, but was always going and coming. I was spending like at least 50% of the time away from wherever home was, whether that was Portland or San Francisco, since like 2000, 2001. And then I was spending a quarter to half of my time out of the country for a long time, since probably 2007. I was spending months of the year overseas since then. Pandemic hit, I had been away for a very long time, like, I don't know, some months. And I came back, like decided to stay in Portland for a while. And then right away, as soon as I was able, I started to travel again and go back to Berlin, go back to places where I run events and do things, and then have gradually increased. And I've already been spending, I think last year I did spend 6 months of the year overseas, even though I technically lived in Portland. I am very nesty. Like when I get to a place, I start nesting right away and I start figuring things out. And I just do this whole like, now this is my place. Like I'm super adaptable that way. And I get very into wherever I am. And then I struggle to transition, but when I'm somewhere, I just start to focus on it. So I had this strong feeling that things were changing in the world. I was at a point in my life, in my career, where I needed to commit. I needed to commit to somewhere. And I was finding it impossible to decide. And that's just something I really struggle with. I had narrowed it down to some places. I had had a plan to spend 9 months in Spain. That fell through. I had had a plan, some time to go to Switzerland. I've been living there for months at a time, chunks of the year. I did a whole program teaching there for literally the last year. I taught in Switzerland the whole year, like every 6 weeks. So I've been like doing things in certain countries and like really being very present, but not technically living there, right? So I thought that London was this stepping stone on my way to Europe. And when I got here, I was like, this is easy. Like, I have a lot of really good friends here. My family lives here. Half of my family lives in Cambridge area. So I always come through England when I travel and spend a lot of time with my family. And I have British heritage. It just feels right. It makes sense. I don't have to learn a language right now, or there's like no pressure around learning a language where I was feeling that was something that back to the Transformational Voice Institute, I had so much trauma around my voice that learning a new language, like the combination of trauma around my neurodivergence and being labeled as kind of stupid or like not, not academically gifted, and then the trauma around my voice, those combined just made me feel so ashamed to try to speak other languages. And I had to really like work on all these different things to get to where, and I think over the years, people have started to reflect to me that it's disappointing to them and feels rude to them that I would spend so much time in their culture and in their country and not try to speak to them, to always expect them to adapt to me. I really feel that, especially in the last 2 years. And so I was like, yeah, I need to step up. I need to do some things with language, and I need to start somehow. And I haven't yet. I've tried a couple times to start Spanish or this or that, but I haven't stuck with it. I've been actually looking at courses here in London. So I felt like, okay, this takes some pressure off. I can still have this goal to start my journey of languages. And I also don't need to have it be like a survival skill.
One thing I do notice when we're traveling, the people speak like 4 different languages. Here in Georgia, they speak at least 3. People speak Georgian, Russian, and English, but other places, people will speak 4. Going to Morocco, they speak Spanish, French, Arabic, and English, and probably more languages than that. I'm so blown away by Europeans and just how they navigate. And I feel very privileged that English is the bridge language, but I wish I spoke more languages.
It's very difficult. I mean, I can relate. I took Japanese in school and hosted Japanese exchange students, had a best friend that was Japanese. I did a lot of things with Japanese culture growing up, and have a very close friend that, for 25 plus years that is very involved in the Japanese community in Portland. So I can pick up words, I can pick up sounds, I can read characters. Like I just took like 2 years of high school Japanese, and I still can like stuff happens very quickly if I'm around it. It's not like I'm speaking it or that I'm understanding what everyone's saying, but there's bits and pieces more than there are in other languages. And the whole thing makes more sense because I had that early exposure. And that was just like, again, as a teenager for 2 years, in like you're taking a class in high school. But people over here are exposed to other languages their entire life. They're exposed to other cultures their entire life. Like, if you live in Switzerland, you're around people who speak different languages constantly. So yeah, if you live in a culture where this language is, around you, you see people, hear people speaking it, you maybe see it on media, of course it's going to be easier. Maybe you learned it in school right away. You start to have more aptitude. And as Americans, and as a West Coast American, Like you know, like now there's Spanish speaking people everywhere, but when I was growing up, there weren't in my neighborhood. And so I didn't get exposed to that until my mid 20s. And it just has never been enough for me to really pick it up. Um, yeah.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, growing up in Los Angeles, it's like I feel like there's no excuse. I should know Spanish. But okay, so we're going to wrap it up with one last question. And that is basically, what do you got going on creatively?
I definitely am still very connected to USA time wise. And I'm flipping back and forth to being very involved here and very connected there. I have a series of events that I've run for 15 years now in Berlin. Berlin is my October home. And I run a festival called Berlin Blues and Fusion Experience. And on either side of that are retreats that one is called Camp Blues and one is a DanceMode method training intensive.
Thank you again for joining me on the Travel, Create, Repeat podcast. Where can people find your dance events and teaching? Your website or
So
anything?
I have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/dancemode, DANCEMODE. Main business name Brenda Jean Russell or DanceMode. And my main three things are the dance education and movement education, and then the sacred sexuality work. So I would say look for DanceMode, DanceMode London, DanceMode Berlin, DanceMode in motion, DanceMode whatever is usually going to be me, Brenda Jean Russell, or Brenda does dot 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 and Spirit Alive.
So many different ways to connect with you. So to close, if you enjoyed this podcast and you would like to hear others, please head over to my website, travelcreaterepeat.com, and subscribe to my emails. There you can also read my travel blog as well as see my art in my art shop. And please subscribe and support me on Patreon at patreon.com/travelcreaterepeat. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for joining me, Brenda, and happy creative travels. See you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.